It's insane. The metrics are there. I'm like, so if you cannot fight for your marriage, I'm like, what are you here for? There's really no reason. Like, oh, do you want more money, more sex, more everything else? Well, then you don't only fight for one thing, just your marriage. That's it.
There's some really good sound bites in there. I think Frank's thing, you want more sex? You want more money?
Yeah.
I know what our YouTube clip is going to be.
More money, more sex? Well,
You got this thing. All right. Hey, welcome to our first, we don't have a really good title yet, but we want to share stories of people in the church. And so this is intended really for us to have a way of getting to know each other. You guys all know me a little too much because I'm up there too much. And then there's a lot of people that we do church with week after week that we just don't get to know. And so that's a big part of our goal here. There's no crazy strategy other than we want to hear what God is doing in your lives. And so with that, I'm really excited that Frank and Jen said yes, both to each other, then to this. And so I'm excited to kind of hear and share their story. And so, yeah, why don't you guys introduce yourselves a little bit, who you guys are, and then you can giddy up and go with your testimony.
Okay. Well, Frank and Jen, and we've been married now for 12 years. Well, coming on 12 years in April. Been together since 2007. That makes it, 18? Coming on 18 years. We have 2 children, an 8-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. And we choose to commit ourselves to each other every day.
I like it.
Yeah. So I'll just go ahead and kind of start with my story, and then Frank can kind of jump in after. Easiest way for me to do this is to kind of just read my testimony that I have written out. That way I don't mumble jumble. So growing up in my home was a hard experience. I remember moving to Elmer at the age of 4 into the low-income townhomes and the feeling of tension getting progressively worse over time. My parents grew up in a very abusive home, and the cycle was repeating itself in our home. My father resorted to control and abuse to manage the household, and my mom resorted to being submissive to the point of allowing my father to abuse us. She would also manipulate and threaten us of our father spanking us in order to get good behavior from us. My parents often fought in front of us or after we went to bed, and my father started treating my mom in slightly more aggressive ways. I look back now and I understand it was from 2 broken hearts that didn't know how to cope, having 8 children and barely making ends meet. As a child, I did not understand this and often took this as I was the problem and shouldn't have been born. The household became increasingly more challenging as my siblings and I repeated what we were taught. We would yell at each other and our parents, and we would resolve conflict by hurting each other in many ways. This escalated my dad's anger, and we would get punished out of anger and would get whipped by a leather belt frequently. During this chaotic way of living, we would attend church every Sunday, pretending we were all happy and good. This caused a lot of confusion, and a seed was planted in me that God was not real. Church was telling me that God was an all-powerful God that loved and would take care of us. Yet when I was at home, I was beaten and yelled at on a constant. So as a child, I believed that God was a make-believe. Things went from bad to worse when I was 11. My dad exposed himself to me, and after that experience, he proceeded to touch me inappropriately. This was sexual abuse, and I had no idea. I went into hiding at this time as I felt it was my fault. My father never talked to me about it, and I didn't dare say anything to anyone. This left me feeling dirty and extremely shameful. This led to a dark world for me as I was exposed to and experienced things a child should never have had to deal with. I became obsessive over the female and male body and started searching the web, which was essentially porn, at the age of around 12. And then I learned about sex. This is where Satan had his first stronghold on me. I continued down this path by getting very explicit novels, which continued until it was no longer enough and curiosity of sex entered my mind. I convinced a sibling to role play with me, and we would look and touch each other while naked. My father caught us, and we were both beaten very badly for this. At this time in my life, I was consumed by shame and guilt, along with the abuse I was experiencing, severe depression, and no self-worth. When I turned 13, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she became an on and off presence in our life. She fought through chemo, radiation, and surgery. She was somewhat of a safe space for me, and now she was gone, and I feared often that she would die. I do remember that she went in for a procedure, and when she was out of surgery, it took her weeks to come to, and that she almost died. My father and other family members thought it was best to lie and continued to tell me that Mom was okay. She just needed to be in the hospital a bit longer. I do not remember how I found out the actual condition of my mom, but it was devastating for a 13-year-old girl. During this season, I was also thrown into the role of caregiver to my younger 4 siblings and had to take on the responsibility of managing the household along with my older sister. I developed a binge eating disorder over these severe traumatic events to help cope when I had no control. I went from a normal-sized child at the age of 10 to severely obese by the age of 14. Life seemed like a black hole, and suicide ideation was a constant at this time. When I was 14, I was invited to a young youth event in Toronto by a cousin who was a youth leader. This weekend, I was filled with love from others and desperate to believe God could help me. Desperately trying to improve my circumstances, I accepted Jesus into my life. I wanted to believe that things would improve for me. However, it was ingrained in me from both my parents and the church that I needed to be perfect. Much to my surprise, I couldn't be perfect and failed constantly. I took this as God not wanting me, and He wouldn't love me. And once again, I was a failure in God's eyes, my parents' eyes, and in my own eyes. I was a nobody and no way to escape it. As I went through my teen years, I started to understand my family dynamics more and learned ways to survive. I found a job, spent extra time at school, and reading a lot. This would help me escape from my reality. I struggled with suicide ideation, with dreaming of ways to do it, but didn't dare speak out. I was taught it was a selfish act, and you could not do that to your family. This continued the shame and the guilt, building deeper strongholds to my negative views of life and coping mechanisms. Sorry, lost my spot. We were still attending church, but I was fighting it more and more, or I would just check out during the service. We also had a major change within the church, and our pastor became very legalistic and old colony, which separated the females and the males, making it a lot more confusing. And then my parents were struggling more financially at this time, which increased the marriage conflict and the abuse. They approached the church at this time for help, and they were turned away. My dad left the church for good at this time. And he became increasingly more emotionally abusive on top of the physical and sexual abuse I had experienced. He was full of hate and said so many things that damaged me, and I know my siblings as well. He stated once that he never wanted me when I was attempting to stop an aggressive fight between him and my mom. He abused my mom more and more, and when she would attempt to read her Bible or talk about God, he would physically abuse her. He left her in the hospital with 4 broken ribs during this time. The cycle would just continued and repeat itself, and it looked like there was no end on sight. When I was 18, my dad developed a clot in his brain and was rushed to the hospital. He was minutes from dead, but they were able to revive him. I thought this was God finally hearing my prayers as a child and asking to help my dad quit smoking. He had caused my mom's cancer, and he almost died now. But and then he came home from the hospital, new man, ready to quit smoking and become a new man. Once again, due to family trauma and abuse and not learning healthy coping mechanisms, my dad was unable to be perfect and failed. It turned him once again to what he knew, anger and abuse, and he started smoking again. I was crushed as I thought this was the turning point for our family. But we were back in the abuse cycle, the never-ending roller coaster of fear, hatred, and division. I had moved out at the age of 18, but the abuse and brokenness continued. I found ways to avoid my family at all costs and tried to avoid people telling who my family was out of embarrassment. I wanted to prove to the world that I was better than them, not at all like my father or mother. At 16, Frank and I started dating. I was in shock that he asked me out, and I couldn't believe that he would want to date a nobody. Entering this relationship, I was so broken, and so was Frank. I had no idea of what a healthy relationship looked like due to trauma bonding on both our parts and in a desperate need to feel loved. We quickly entered into an intimate relationship outside of marriage. This only broke us more as we started this journey. I hurt Frank in many ways and was hurt in many ways, but I stayed due to the fear of never finding love. Again, I was clouded by what a relationship should look like, and I became anorexic at this time, so I could be more pleasing to Frank and be accepted by him. During our dating years, I also tried tapping I also tried trapping Frank into a forever relationship by lying, stealing, and tricking him in many ways. I would attempt to get pregnant so that he would be stuck with me. I also lied about having a miscarriage so that he would feel sorry for me and stay. Along with trying to trap him, I also believed that I had to please him in any way possible. And this was due to my past exposure to sex through books and online porn. This led me to introducing porn into our relationship, thinking this would lead him to loving me more and that he would not leave me. I do understand today, though, that I didn't love me and I didn't accept myself, which led to these desperate acts that only broke me more. Even though our relationship was very toxic and full of brokenness, I do believe God used it to help us survive when growing up in broken homes and not knowing who he truly was. Frank stated he would only marry me if I went to college, and therefore I enrolled into college. I thank him often today, even though it was manipulating at the time. But he did do it as he believed in me and when I didn't. I chose out of no self-worth to isolate myself from others while I was in college. And I continued to believe the lie that I was a nobody. Being isolated from others and living in a new town created a deep sense of loneliness. My family never visited me, and Frank would only visit me on weekends, and at times could not make it, deepening my loneliness. The choices I made out of deep loneliness led to years of anguish and pain in our marriage. I chose to be unfaithful to Frank and showed my body off to another man through the internet. And this stayed a deep, dark secret until Frank and I were married for 4.5 years. This relationship was so full of lies, unfaithfulness, poor coping mechanisms, and full of denial. We continued this relationship though, and we were engaged in the fall of 2011. During our engagement, we started to go to churches to find a pastor to marry us. This is where seeds were planted and eventually would grow into seeing God and hearing God for who he was. The first 5 years continued to run on a cycle of lies and unfaithfulness and me resulting to my negative coping mechanisms. In 2016, we had our first child, a daughter. This added another layer to my trauma, as I now felt the overwhelming need to protect her in any means possible. No one was going to hurt my daughter like I was hurt, and I ended up isolating the both of us from so many people, including my husband, both my parents, and my in-laws. It led to a very lonely and depressive maternity leave. During this time, I continued to live a life full of anger and resentment. I hated my dad and the brokenness of my family, but I continued living in a victim state and unwilling to see that I needed to change. This led me to bottling up all my emotions and hurt over the years, and then I would portray it onto my husband, unknowingly thinking he would be like my father. This led to a sense of always needing to protect myself and daughter from him, and that often meant me pushing him to the side and not loving him the way God called us to love. In 2017, my husband and I left the church and our marriage continued to spiral, and looking back, not sure how we kept going. I was a person that was filled with so much shame, anger, resentment, selfishness, and bitterness, and I didn't know who I was anymore. During this time, we moved to Mount Salem, and good friends encouraged and invited us to the Mount Salem Community Church. We started attending on and off, but we're not serious about it. I was pregnant with our second child in the summer of 2018, and I was starting to see how broken I was. This is mostly because of a dear mentor in my life that refused to give up on me. I started seeing a counselor through Caring for the Heart, which was where I was able to start scratching the surface of the pain in my life. Here I started to realize I needed Christ in my life and was taught that God didn't need perfect. He just needed a willing heart. I was told that he accepted and loved me for who I was, that the good and the bad. December of 2018, I was baptized at the Mount Salem Community Church and became a member. Although I had a lot of excitement and hope, I continued to struggle on how to heal and continued to go back to my coping mechanisms of binge eating, lying, being codependent, always finding others that were worse than me to justify my actions, and using porn when feeling disconnected from my husband. I was also struggling on how to be a mom to 2 little children. My faith could not grow as I stifled myself in this tiny bubble of needing to be healed instantly and to be a know-it-all about Christianity. I continued to live behind a mask, but this time I pretended everything was perfect because I assumed as a Christian I needed to be healed instantly. So therefore, no longer needing counseling. God has an amazing way of working in people, and often we cannot see it until we're through it. He led me to a point where I was fed up with myself. So in late 2019, I started reconciling my relationship and asking for forgiveness for the wrong I had done to my father. And in early 2020, my father randomly showed up at my doorstep and asked for forgiveness as well. Here we were able to slowly start reconciling our relationship. But then COVID hit in 2020, and I went into a very dark season. I allowed Satan to overtake my mind through social media, the news, and negative influences for approximately 1.5 years. I was severely depressed and contemplated suicide often, as I truly believed my husband and my children would be better off without me. I lived a life again full of fear, anxiety, anger, resentment, bitterness, selfishness, and being self-absorbed. I went into a complete survival mode and was completely absent to my husband and children. In the spring of 2021, I was starting to see how easily I was trapped by Satan's tactics and allowed him to full control, shutting God out. I knew I needed to make drastic changes. I started by deleting all of my social media accounts, as this was the easiest tactic in having me spin out of control. I started asking myself hard questions of who I wanted to be and become. I started picking up my Bible again and doing devotions. I knew I needed to be a more present wife, mom, sister, daughter, aunt, and friend. I just didn't know how important family was or how short life really was. 2022 came, and my father was admitted to the ER for a heart attack. 3 weeks later was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer, giving him 6 months to a year to live. We had been working on our relationship slowly, but it was still far from true healing and love. When my father was diagnosed, I became the point person in his medical decisions, and I was taking him to all his appointments. This was an extremely exhausting, defeating, and emotionally draining season, but I see now it was God's miracle of giving us time we needed to heal. Sadly, he lost his battle only 4 months into his diagnosis and passed May 2nd of 2022. My father came to know and accept Christ during this time, and I am beyond grateful for this. He was a man full of pain and brokenness and came from a lineage of abuse and trauma. May 1st, the day before he passed, he was on his way to the church to give his testimony and become a member of the church he was attending. When he arrived, my sister came to me and said that he was not doing well. He started going in the parking lot, and we had to rush him to the ER. I was blessed once again here by God as COVID restrictions continued, and I was not allowed in the room. A friend I knew was working that day, and she got my mom and I into the room. Here, while my father was slipping away, we had the most honest and loving relationship. As he continued to slip in and out of consciousness, he awoke and looked at both my mother and I and shared a vision of us, his immediate family walking together with Jesus. He said, "Heaven is more beautiful than anyone would ever imagine." And then secondly, you would have to know my dad, but he would compliment and show love through odd comments or jokes. And he looked at me, and in Low German, he said, "Die bist ein Funja," or in English, "You are a funny one." I just knew God was there in that room that day because I knew what he meant. Years of trauma and pain, and I am sitting here at his side in his most vulnerable state. After a few hours of working details out at the hospital, we were able to drive my dad home, where he passed peacefully the next morning with his family by his side, his dying wish. I share this because I'm so proud to be a daughter of his and will continue to have him live on through me. I also share it to show how God is a waymaker and a miracle worker, and that he never gives up on anyone, as long as we're willing to hear his call. After his death, though, I once again pushed my husband to the side. I left him because I was grieving, and he could just wait. 2022 to 2024, I worked as a health coach and nurse at the Family Central. Here, I received a lot of in-your-face learning from God. I honestly cannot wait to meet God, as I personally feel he has such a good sense of humor. I was a health coach, and I was teaching others about identity, relationships, finances, spiritual and mental wholeness. But reality, God was teaching me these things. Growing up in a broken home that stifled the ability to learn what it was to have a healthy emotions, coping strategies, or relationships kept me stuck for years in a victim mentality. When I was able to see these things in a positive way, I was able to step out of my denial. My coworkers, manager, they were able to help me to see life in a whole new way. And I was voluntold to help lead Celebrate Recovery, and it is a huge blessing to my life. I started counseling again in June of 2022 and have not stopped. I was able to start digging deeper into God's word to hear him. And here is where I was able to receive the message of it was time to quit my job and rest. I had been fighting, clawing, and trying to control my entire life up until this point. I was exhausted. So that kind of sums up my life. So do as you will.
I'm processing here. Like there's a, because we were like, I would have said we were close, right? And what always strikes me when we do these is how little you know about people, right? And how little you actually see of their struggle. Because when you look at you and Frank, like when you guys started sharing some stuff, I was like, because you guys have all the appearance of success. You guys have all the appearance of happiness. You have all the appearance of living the Canadian dream. And so then when you guys share, I'm over here just trying to keep myself together. I'm like, what in the world? So we'll get to some questions later, but Frank, you want to share yours? And then...
Yeah, what you just said there, like we literally just talked about this morning, like how people view you like that don't know you, right? And that's most people. That's close friends of mine don't know the story, right? And so I was from a super conservative old colony home. My parents won't watch this, so I won't have to worry about saying too much. But they essentially was abandoned. Like, so 7 years old, they left me on a field. They took off. 10 years old, they started a farm. I was also left again with, don't know who the people were. I was left to work. But I was essentially became an employee at that point. So there was 60-hour weeks would have been a slow week. There was emotional, physical, financial abuse. Wasn't able to keep my money. Like, I was dating Jen. I remember I was 20. I turned, my birthday's in March, and it was like in, I don't know, probably June. I'm like I can't do this no more. Like, I was like, hey, like, I said, Dad, I'm a foreman. I lead a crew of guys. Like, I can't afford to take my girlfriend out to dinner. Like, something's got to change. And I fought him. He fought me. Basically, it came down to, I was like, he said he'd do me a favor by keeping my money. I said, okay, that's fine, but I'm gonna prove you wrong. And then, so I went all the wrong ways about proving him wrong. I succeeded. It doesn't mean it's healthy. I was out of the house in 18 months. 18 months I was out. But like in that period of time, not following God, not no church life. So my parents were good as long as I lied. As soon as I got my license, I said, "Yep, we're going to church," and did anything but. I didn't do.
You would just drive around?
Oh yeah, it was zero church involved. Did not at all. Yeah, church was not on my priority at all. But when I found Jen, like as she said, we had a super unhealthy relationship, to say the least. And there's a lot of shame on my behalf. But you hope God works. For things work for the worse. God works for good, and I have to believe that because outside of that, I just you bury yourself in shame, and so. But yeah, it was. Growing up was not a good time. People often oh, you have the farm, you have this, and you have that. I'm like, I was by myself for most of my childhood. From 10 years old till, I would say 18, I had zero life. Yeah, it was, of all the people that wish they were me, it's like, okay, well, you can have my life if you want. I mean, have at her. But yeah, love was performance. What did you get done that day? You didn't get done enough that day. It was viewed as a failure. And like I said before, financial abuse was keeping my money as long as they could. When Jenna got married, I carried these things into her life, which ended up in. Well, we were both super busy. You were working 3 jobs. I was working 1 job, but was like 3 hour, like 3
Might as
shifts.
well have been 3.
But like I became addicted to work, to stress. I was, even if I wasn't busy, it was a failure to me too. I felt like you always had to be busy and always had to be doing something, or else someone might see you as being lazy, right? And that's a Mennonite way, which also super critical and negative towards myself. But especially in the times of after Lauren was born, COVID and all that, started the business, which is the kicker is like people view success a certain way, and like they don't know the battle that you fight each and every day, super negative towards myself. Jen was struggling through COVID. Again, with all like managing a business and all that stuff, you become lost. And you cope by, well, I'm not good at being at home, so I will work more. And because I can do that, I can work hard. I know that it's what I'm essentially bred to do.
Changing diapers wasn't the
Not my forte. 1,017 times a day. But like, so I just worked, and you worked, like gone at 5 a.m, gone till 9 p.m, and like I wouldn't see my kids. Looking back now, I'm like, it's basically like a divorced dad, basically. But yeah, it led to, again, the unhealthy. You lean into what you know, which is working, and then when that doesn't cope, then like you can't cope with that, then you numb out, with pornography, alcohol, just to quiet the noise. But again, it's not what people see.
Right.
People don't see that. People see, oh, your business is doing good, or you see your signs all over the place. I've heard that before too, and like I'm grateful for that, but they don't see underneath it.
Right.
And so I just heard different stuff about people saying different things, and I'm like, it's all on which side of the fence you look, right? It can be, there's a whole other picture on the outside.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. It's
Yeah, it does to me. I mean, I can't speak for everybody listening. They can speak for themselves, but it makes
they can
sense.
judge me. That's fine.
That's
They do
fine.
before anyways.
Post it in the comments. Okay, so there's a couple things that I mean, there's a lot here. I would say that there was a lot of the darker side. Why did you guys choose each other? Like, what was that? And then maybe carry that into like, how do you survive dating years like that? I know you said there was some of the shame piece, but what was it about each other that drew yourself to? And did you realize during that time it was as toxic as it is now? I mean, now when you look back, you guys see things. So yeah, basically, like, because what you're presenting, I'm like, how do you survive to the point where you're like, yeah, let's get married? Yeah. Sounds like a good idea, right? Though, like, I guess from the piece that we're talking about here, I'm like, what? So maybe talk about that, because I think there's a lot of our culture sucks us suffering. The minute something hurts, we want to bail, and so I think there's like
So I'll just say this. We just came back from a marriage conference from like a Ramsey Center. There's like Rachel Cruz and John Aloni. They hosted it. They had a couple of different personnel that were there too. Great time. We had a fantastic time. There's a lot of things that you heard it before, but it's like seeing and hearing this stuff in person and other people's hurts in person creates a different dynamic. So when you say, why do we stay married? It's a weird question, because I don't know if we know the answer to that. I think it was like...
Now we do. Now we know we choose to commit commit to each other.
She's good looking, and that's why I'm here. And so,
And my face goes red.
yeah, the glasses. But like, so it's a very.
I think it
I don't know
comes-
if we made a choice for ourselves.
No, we never. made
Eventually, later,
choices.
we did.
No, but I think at that time, while we stayed together, was because we were so desperate. If I look back on it, we were so desperate to feel loved that we just hung on to what we thought
Was love.
was love. We didn't know any different. Like,
So it felt somewhat normal. Like, did anybody pull you aside at that point and be like,
No, nobody. That's the crazy part. Like, I'm like, I wish somebody would have said something to me. Like I said, I have a lot of shame and a lot of guilt around our relationship early on. It's not that I was out of bad intentions, out of my heart, but people make comments, and like, if you ask Jen, like, she'll tell you, like, it haunts me. And so,
would you like me to share it?
go ahead.
Okay. So he was 20 when we first started dating, and I was 16. And a lot of people would make comments about, like, oh, like, how did it go?
rob the cradle?
Yeah, rob the cradle. And it
Thanks, Albert.
created. No, it's okay.
Now I triggered him.
But it did. It created a lot of shame for him over the years. But it's hard. Like, for me, how I saw it is he was saving me in such a dark life I was living. Like, I was finally seen. Like, I didn't see it like I was being taken advantage of in any way, shape, or form. I was just like, somebody actually loves me. Somebody wants me.
Right.
And I think that's just kind of what made us stay together. And then just that fear, like that ultimate fear that if I don't end up, this is for me anyways, if I don't end up with him, if he doesn't marry me, there is nobody else. I'm not going to find anybody else because I'm a nobody. Nobody wants me. So I think that's what made me stay no matter what.
Well, the codependency for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, codependency was a big issue. Don't remember both of your questions there. You had a few different ones. Like, why did we stay married?
Yeah, I think anywhere along the journey, like, there was lots of reasons to jump off. Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
because I would even, so with some of the infidelity stuff, like, how do you guys navigate that?
I think for
Super
denial.
unhealthy.
Denial is
Well, we haven't.
yeah.
No, it's like it's a weird and like I say from the minute way because that's where I was raised. I feel like I can speak from that point. People can't judge me because that's where I was. That's where I came from. That
You don't get a divorce. no matter
viewpoint,
what. Yeah.
you don't get a say really. Like you're just you do as you're told. You follow this way. You don't go to school. One of the like a side view was like she went to school, and it was like that was not a thing where I came from. Like it was like, oh, you're done picking cucumbers. Well, then go find a framing job, or like you go work a manual labor job. And that was your options. You didn't have options outside of that. But
I was different.
you were different, yeah.
Oh, you're different. I would echo that.
Yeah.
It's all right. Yeah, like, so what are some of the things like now, like when you guys, let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
How did you guys survive COVID? Like, at what point was there a point where you were like, I'm bailing? Because I know you dive into the work. Like, I get a lot of the responses you're saying, but what intrigues me is that in a culture where divorce has become so accepted, you guys are choosing not to, despite, like, was there the temptation? Like, was that in the back of your head? Like, why not act on that? Because from what I'm gathering, at least, like, it's not like this marriage. Like, you're realizing now you're codependent. You're realizing some of this, but it's not like you came to a realization and then it was like, oh, now it's good. Like, it was like little layers peeled off, but then there was a new trauma, and then a new trauma, and then a new trauma. How do you walk alongside? Like, what are the things that you guys, when you look back now, I know some of it is I don't know if there's always a clear answer, but are there some things that you guys feel like you guys did well during that time to make it work?
I will say, like, on my behalf, I white knuckled it. Didn't talk to nobody. None of my friends knew it. Not not my neighbors.
Does explain why you guys never invited us over for supper. I can tell you that.
But it was like, you just white knuckle it. And it was like, for me, again, my upbringing maybe like helped in that sense, is you don't give up.
I wouldn't say that, not give up. You just don't do it.
You just don't do it. Yeah.
No matter the cost, you just stay together.
Because you can give up in a marriage. Like you can leave each other in a marriage.
Yeah.
And the marriage still stays intact.
Yeah.
Is that what you felt? Is that what it would have felt like? It was kind of like.
Oh, we were.
Oh yeah, we were married.
just-
We were married by name.
Yeah, we were definitely living separate lives for sure. Yeah, because he'd work all day and I'd be at home with the kids, and I just went into this darkness. Like I literally contemplated leaving so many times, and we fought over this, and I was looking at apartments already and how I was going to do this and how I was going to leave, and I even got to the point where I was on the verge of making that next step to suicide. Like I had started messaging him and the one mentor in my life, like just dark stuff about like, I'm done. There's no point. Like, you guys are better off without me. Like, there's just no point in me being here. And I truly believed it in that time. And like, you messaged Catalina, right?
I might have.
I think, yeah, he messaged her and she was just like on me like no other. Like, she has been that one presence in my life that has, I think, helped me to keep going. She's just never given up on me. And she, when I said she was on me, she was on me. Like, she would not leave me alone. She would not stop calling me. She would not stop texting me. And then her and Frank started just helping me to get out of that darkness. And that's where I realized I needed counseling again, because this just couldn't continue. I could not continue at this because Marcus was a year and a half at that time. Like, it was...
dark.
Yeah, it was sad and dark, for sure.
But like one of the things that we discussed too is like I got counseling in 2020. Well, a year and a month ago, 2 months ago, month and a half, about a year ago. But like counseling is a big thing, and people. So in our culture, when I say our culture is the Mennonite culture, is like it's a very twisted way of looking at life. But like it's seen as a lesser than. Like you're coming from a place of defeat rather than a place of triumph. And then like I think if more people would see it differently, like I've talked about some different things, and it's like sometimes you kind of come around the situation like am I the only one that's like do I only the guy that struggles with this stuff, or like is it just me? Is it like like am I the one that's broken? But we're not taught to talk that way. Yeah. But again, we sought counseling separately. Still do. We still do. But we haven't done marriage counseling, but we're separately seeking counsel.
This is like marriage counseling. I won't charge you guys for this one. This one's free.
Do we get it for free?
It's free. Yeah. I will check your title on Sunday. But. So one of the things that, an observation, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I feel like we have shifted from white knuckle to expecting counseling to fix it. And I feel like we've lost something. Like when I hear you guys like, yeah, I think you should have gone to counseling earlier and could have gotten more help. But I feel like a lot of this generation is like, because I go to counseling, I can expect to not suffer.
Yeah.
And
No.
right?
No.
Yeah. No. It's become like a hallmark or a like a catchphrase, right? Oh, I go to counseling. Oh, you're a healthy individual. No, it's totally waste your money if you're not going to put the work in.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we come down to. So we got some sideways looks. People are like, hey, what are you doing? Going to Nashville. You're going to the bars. I would love to have gone to the bars. I want to hear the country.
It was like the bars, but
They threw a heck of a party. But no, like I love country music and I love to hear some live music. But like, you get some strange looks when you say you're gonna go to a marriage retreat.
right.
That's the way I felt. It's like, yeah, but it's gonna be cool. I promise, because I whatever. Right? We follow these people and they're great to listen to, but like, So one of the things was there they said the same thing, and like the last 2 days the same thing. So there's
Is it the text?
people that are happily married, they have like a 545% better like state of life. Like their life is 600 times better than the next person that is not happy with their marriage. They have more sex, they have more money, they have better jobs, they have better education. I can't speak for the education part. I'm not educated, but
But for the other ones,
for her, look how well she's done. But
right?
Yeah, I'm at home doing nothing right now.
but no, it's like it's insane. The metrics are there. I'm like, so if you cannot fight for your marriage, I'm like, what are you here for? There's really no reason. Like, oh, do you want more money, more sex, more everything else? Well, then you only fight for one thing, just your marriage. That's it.
And it's being very intentional too. Like we've decided like when we got to that point where we were done, we had to like have those hard conversations. And it was, what are we going to do? How are we going to fight for each other? We're tired of putting on this face. How do we fight? And it's just waking up every day and choosing to commit to each other, no matter what. We don't have it figured out. We still fight. Fighting is good in marriage, but like we don't fight fairly. I guess you would say we're learning how to fight fairly, and we're learning how to be vulnerable with each other. We've never been taught those things, so now we have to actually
Implement or
you
listen to all the podcasts you want.
but you have to like speak your wants. You have to speak your needs. Like we can't read each other's minds, no matter how many people say it. You can't speak the other person's mind. So you have to really learn how to say what you need and want in the marriage. And then getting risk of being hurt again, because being vulnerable means that there's a risk of the other person saying no to you. But you have to in order to have a true and honest relationship. You just have to. So
There's some really good sound bites in there. I think Frank's thing, you want more sex? You want more money?
Yeah.
I know what our YouTube clip is going to be.
More money, more sex. Well,
You got this thing.
your church is going to increase by like 150% next week. But
You know what? It's really interesting.
prosperity gospel. Sorry.
There's a piece to it, though, right? Like,
It is.
I think
It's
there's
kinda real.
Your choices do impact, right? And I think that when you give up on things so quick, I think there is consequences. And I think a lot of us because people will hear this from their own stories, but then there's a lot of people who are like, they'd hear your story, Jen, and they'd go, why didn't your mom just leave? Right. And so I think there's a big part of that I think is hard for people, because this story ended up phenomenal. And I think outside of faith, it's hard to grasp having any hope in a situation like that. Right. And I think that's where the more stories I listen to, like, and it's so funny, me and Will were just talking about this morning, the miracle of marriages that stay together. And how when we always look for miracles and we go, man, like I'm good friends with Herman and Annie Clausen, so endlessly we're bugging him about being brought back from the dead. And just the miracle
No, it's
that
good.
he's alive. But we're like, that's not really nearly as impressive as the fact that, some of these marriages that should never be married, you're like, well, what is that? Like, how did that, like, that's miraculous that you two stayed, and then being able to cut off that generational trauma for the next. Because I think, and that's one of the sad things, is you go like, what, my parents were abused, and thus they abused us, and then we were abused. And so it's all, the justification is all there. Yeah. The reason why people do it is all there. And I think having a soft enough heart to see that matters, but you want it to end.
No, it's like the thing that the people that we went to see, one of his phrases is like, and he quotes it from somebody else, but he's like, the thing with generational trauma is someone's got to turn and face the forest fire.
Yeah.
And so we're trying our best to do that.
it ends
Get
with
burned
us.
so that our kids don't get the same, get caught in the same trap. And again, like I go back to what you said there before, like people view outside things differently. And I talked to, not a close friend, but like I talked to somebody, they're like, yeah, not that I would think that way of myself at all, but they would say like, oh, like, it must be nice to be Frank. You know, he has this and whatever things going on. Like, I struggle with that because I'm like, you haven't sat in my shoes. Like, you don't know.
That just happened last weekend.
Did?
You sent me a text after men's group.
Yes. No, I did. Yep.
Right? Because I made a comment of...
Yeah.
Because you showed up. And like, I don't know if you can see it here, but his shirt's a bit tight. You can definitely tell there's things under there. He's got a tattoo hanging out. And so I just make the joke. I'm like, you know, like everybody wants to be like Frank. And then you sent me that message after and I thought about it. I'm like, that's really interesting. And now hearing your story, I'm kind of like, I think it really adds some really great perspective to... It is awesome where you're at. I hope you're proud of where you guys have come. Like, I hope you're enjoying that piece. But I think it is super crucial when you look at other people to go, man, there's more.
Yeah, and like I'm always super careful. Like you don't judge a book by its cover, and I think that's where I come from. And when I said that to you, is like because it was not the first, not the second, not the third. I was like, shoot, if I am portraying something that I shouldn't be portraying, that's why I texted you, right? Like I was like, I don't want to be. I hope you know me good enough to know that, right? I'm not like that kind of a person, but like if somebody thinks a certain way, I mean, man, I give you here's my shoes, put them on.
It's not your shoes, I want your muscles. Those are the things that I want.
Do you want those though?
Well, I don't.
Just full of water.
No, I know, but listen.
Lots of creatine.
You tried. You tried when you lived there to get me to work out. So the effort on your part was there. No, okay, so as we start to wrap up, the question that keeps popping into my head is why share this? This is a huge risk. Like when I'm hearing you here, I'm cringing at some of this. I'm like, man, this is hard.
So we talked about this. She's like, are you okay with us talking about this? Are you okay with us? Are you okay with you sharing this part of yourself? Are you okay with me sharing this part of myself? And my biggest thing is if we can help even one person to avoid 20% of the pain that we did, man, I hope then it's worth it. Yeah. I wish somebody did that for us. Mm-hmm. It was not there. I mean, it's not nobody to blame. It just wasn't there. Yeah. But if we can just share a little bit of our story to help encourage and help somebody else in a young marriage or whoever they are. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they get to, take some of our life lessons. Hopefully it's not for nothing. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Hopefully it's not for nothing. Yeah.
Right.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that, John?
You said something about us being like at peace, and I'm going to correct that. We are working towards peace, but we still struggle a lot. And that was the biggest thing we wanted to make sure people understood is just, we don't share this because we have it figured out. We don't. Right. We still fight all the time. We're still trying to fight through a lot of our issues because the negative coping mechanisms are so quick to come back anytime there's an issue. And we both understand that and realize that. And we're getting better at coming out of them faster and working on our healing. But I think the biggest thing for us is we want to be great friends. Well, Delony said, great friends, great lovers. And that's something that we're striving for. For a marriage to work well, you need to be great friends. Like you have to have this friendship for it to work. And that's something that we're definitely striving for is to have that great friendship, being great lovers, and just dreaming together, making our life what we want it to be, not what we were told it had to be. Right. Create our own life.
The one thing, the catchphrase is like, you get to choose.
Yeah, you get to choose. And I don't think we ever understood that growing up. No. Like we were never given an option to choose, right? This is just the way it is, and this is the way it's always going to be. I can never say that right in German. But now it's just we have this understanding, no, we actually get to choose. We have the power to choose. You have the power to change. You have the power to heal. You have the power to everything in your life. You actually have a lot more control than what people think they have.
Right.
But it also means sweat and tears.
Right.
And it's just choose your heart. Do you want to continue to stay in, like we were just in a spiral of chaos? Or do you want to do the hard work in doing all these things and actually sitting down at the end of our life and going, we're here. We made it. We still love each other. We're great friends. Right. That's what we want. Right. We want to be that old weird couple that's still hugging and kissing. So, and be proud of it.
I would be. I mean, you know what? Oh man, there's so much. I'm trying to think of. I feel like I need to do a second podcast with you.
I told you. Well, I told you.
Because there's the investing in your marriage thing. Like I think a lot of the things that Josie and I invest in, and I think of like sports has been a big thing for our family. So if anybody knows our family, we're a pretty big sports family. The impact of investing and giving your kids opportunity makes a big difference in who they become and who they shape to become. And then you think of where do you invest your time, your energy, and most people would go, they do almost nothing for their marriage. Like, it's an assumption that the most complex relationship you're ever going to have is one that you'll figure out just by time.
Yeah, and I would say like too, like people have an illusion of them being married just because they're by the marriage license.
Right.
People leave a long time before that.
Right.
It's not comical. It's not a funny thing. It's just like, it's an observation. Is like, no, people leave way before. Right. Way before. Most times, if divorce happens, guaranteed the person's left 2 years before.
Yeah. The death of the relationship happened before, inwardly before it happened outwardly. Yeah. Okay. We're definitely going to do that. I would like to do a follow-up one with you guys at some point to talk about kind of the aftermath and what we're doing going forward. Because I think there's two parts to the story. There's the part of, and I love the way Jesus says it, the story of cleaning the house clean and you get the demon out. But if you don't replace that with anything, and I feel like that becomes its own entire podcast of, so what do we fill in now to make sure that we don't go down those? Because it is like, and you don't know the next trauma that's coming down. Yeah. You don't know the next hardship that's coming down, right? And so...
Yeah, no, that's we can definitely talk about some more. I mean, whatever form that comes, because like we're filling in the gaps as we go. So we can definitely talk about that some more.
That's awesome. Okay. Hey, for those of you guys watching, man, I hope that you guys were as inspired as Trevor and I were sitting here listening. I think there's a lot of what they've shared too. I think there are a pile of people that can relate to it. And there's piles of people that struggle with the same thing. And so I'm hoping that part of what you guys hear out of this is don't wait until it gets desperately bad to seek help. Don't be letting your shame of the situation that you're in keep you from getting help. Once you get in a situation, you're in that situation. And so my hope is, at least as you guys are hearing this, you're like, there is still hope. And so let's reach out. Let's, find a way to move ahead. And then the other piece, man, some of you guys who are in the stage where you want to give up, maybe white knuckle a little bit longer. I think that hearing Frank and Jen's story and knowing a bunch of other people's stories, I think there's a space for, I made those vows and the vows keep me here even when it doesn't feel like I want to be here. And that's a tough journey. But man, I don't want to say thanks. And so I'm going to do something that we hadn't planned, but I'd like to pray over you guys as we leave and pray over this podcast. And so, Father God, just thank you for your story that we got to hear through Frank and Jen today. God, what an incredible God that you can walk alongside two incredibly broken people and without using control and manipulation, be able to lead them to a place where they are finding out how valued and loved they really are. And so, God, I just want to acknowledge the miracle that you've accomplished here. And so I want to say that as this podcast goes out and whoever's going to see it, that this becomes a spark that does not point towards Frank and Jen, but it points back towards you. God, it's cool when you listen to the story and there's all these spaces where we're not really sure why Jen stayed alive and we're not sure why they stayed together and we're not sure why some of this. And we do know why. You worked and you kept them in that place. God, there are people listening who have that relationship with their dad and their mom, and they've given up. And I pray that listening to Jen's story will remind them to never give up. That maybe it will be on their deathbed, maybe it will be in those last moments, but to keep fighting for those relationships, to keep fighting for mom and dad and for your kids and for your relationships. And so, God, we just ask that through this, that you will continue to protect Frank and Jen and their marriage, for their kids. that you can continue to use them as light to the people around them. Thank you for your goodness, for your mercy, for your grace. We love you. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.